Our political commentators today, Dale Husband and Liam Hehir. Kia ora korua, welcome both.
Hey, kia ora to you, Catherine. Is this the way to Tamarillo?
We've already made that joke. We were very tempted.
Righto. Okay, I guess everybody does.
Sorry, it's a goodie. We're tempted to play it, but we may not.
The Bunny Walters version is the best.
It is. It's everyone's earworm from now anyway. Liam Hehir, good morning to you.
Tēnā korua.
No song for us.
Yeah, away you go, Liam. Get into it, mate. Good one. Kia ora to you, Liam.
Liam's a Palmerston North lawyer, political commentator, member of the National Party. Dale's a long-time broadcaster and Radio Watia presenter of a current affairs program. I've called it the GDP result quake because while it's one quarter and who knows, it could yet be revised, it seemed to just be the last straw when it came to discussions about how the economy's going and how government policy is or isn't impacting. Liam, how damaging was it for a government that seems to have claimed a lot of the credit for things like interest rates coming down and that had a goal of this year being all about going for growth?
Yeah, the government can't have it both ways, right? I mean, you can't claim credit for green shoots and then not claim credit when they get snuffed out. Another example is taking credit for very high farmer confidence, which is directly related to strong international prices, nothing to do with the government. So even though governments don't have a lot of control over the overall economy, as part of the bargain that they take is that they have to take the blame. And the GDP figures, they really, they do get cut through, but only in terms of ratifying what we're all feeling, right? Which is that actually things have really stagnated in what was meant to be the year of the great turnaround.
It's the point. I mean, how many people normally would even keep track of what's happening to a quarter of GDP, which is rear view as well? But it just came as such a big hit. As we said, it may yet be revised up, I should say. It may not have been as big a hit. Who knows? But Dale, is it the timing? It's just awful with everything the government's trying to sell right now.
Never fear, Nicola Willis is here. Well, that's the call from our Prime Minister. Look, it's just a wave of flatness that we've witnessed here with the GDP, but you can throw in mortgage rates, inflation rates, costs at the pump, costs at the checkouts. It's all pointing in the wrong direction for a government hell-bent on economic growth at the expense of many of the kaupapa that we hold dear as New Zealanders. Environmental protection, it's all been pushed to the side as we seek this international growth, which hasn't been forthcoming. The mortgage rates are still there, and we've still got swathes of people who are opting to bail out and head offshore. So no, it's disappointing for the government. We all admit that they inherited a tough piece of economic turf, but for all the gloating and celebrations that we've got the best person in the job as finance minister, it doesn't paint a good picture, does it? And it'll cost in the polls, already is, and it'll be the pressure point for the election next year, no doubt, Catherine.
Liam, a lot of talk about whether the mistakes the government did make, and you want to elaborate, I'm sure, on what it can and can't do. Interest rates really on their own, not its particular preserve. High dairy prices, again, not its particular preserve.
Yeah.
What it can do is spend when the private sector is struggling. It's the old Keynesian counter-cyclical spending. It came in and either paused or cancelled some things. You could have said, we don't like the Kaingaora program as it's unfolding and we're going to review it, but let it keep going for now. Has it shot itself a bit in the foot with this show of, responsible sort of fiscal management that ended up actually preventing some fiscal management?
Yeah, well, just two things on that. So just one fact check, which is that actually mortgage rates are heading in the right direction. Mortgage rates have come down a hell of a lot. Government can't take credit for it, but it is something that actually is it's sort of been a positive development. The problem is that it's such a lagging indicator, right?
Lagging indicator, and people are saving, Liam. This is what they would not have anticipated. People got burnt by those high interest rates, and they're now putting it into their mortgages or squirreling it away to the tune of $17 billion, I think, in extra mortgage payments.
The paradox of thrift, as Keynes would have called it. Yeah. But look, there's the other thing is though, it's however much you might disagree with the government having some fiscal restraint, the reality is that actually there hasn't actually been any real cuts in real terms of overall government spending, and it's quite wrong to characterise how the government has sort of acted since it took office as being anything approximating austerity. We do have I think any government in New Zealand was going to struggle. It's very easy to say spend more, but the reality is that there's only so many times you can do it. And we had the big crisis with COVID, and that really did eat up a lot of the headroom we had for counter cyclical spending.
Yeah.
We're very for New Zealand. We have very high levels of debt. We're not like Japan or the United States or Germany, where we can sustain very high levels of debts because we have such a powerful economy, but we have less margin for error. So I think that whether it was Labour or National, it was going to be a poison chalice, and the reality is that there's not much that any government can do about the fundamentals of the economy.
Dale, is that part of the
outside of government control?
Dale, is that part of the problem? It's not the message that they've run right from the campaign on mergers and acquisitions when Christopher Luxon was campaigning for his credentials, calling this the year of growth, and then telling what were they, merchants of doom last month, people who were talking about how much the economy's struggling. Did it need a more nuanced and perhaps honest selling of the situation? I know Winston Peters of late has latched on to this is going to take time.
Yeah, that's a nice old catch cry, isn't it? Yeah, I think the last word you meant, a little bit more honesty. Look, I know that the Prime Minister was keen to see growth, but we've been forced into this period of stagnation. I do agree with Liam. It's been difficult for this government, any government, to be honest, just with the geopolitical circumstances, the tariffs coming in from the States obviously is having an impact. But for average Joe out on the street and for mums and dads who are forced to pay exorbitant prices for things that we assume are part of New Zealand's lifestyle, milk, butter, meat, I mean, they're all going through the roof. And so, the decisions for next year are going to be made literally on what's available in people's pockets.
Yeah.
And we know that a lot of people are bailing out, and we know that even the iwi Leaders Forum, the Council of Trade Unions are combining. Māori are combining for a hui to focus in on the difficulties workers are facing later in October. So it's just really difficult turf here, and for mums and dads, it's just going through the roof, and they don't know where to turn.
That's a great point. I was reading. Go ahead, Liam. Yep.
Can I just say what worries me, and it should be a bipartisan worry, is that it's not like we've been hit by a nuke or anything like that. There's no actual disaster that's happened. What's just being exposed is that the New Zealand economy has a long-term weakness, right? It's structural in nature, and there's no quick fix. You can tinker around at the edges, but actually there's actually not necessarily an answer from any political party about our core weaknesses. And what's really worrying, if you talk about government spending, is that actually we couldn't cover this in the good times. We'd be borrowing for the basics even if we were in the good times. We had lots of tax revenue coming in compared to now. And so I as a father, that's actually something that really, really worries me.
But Liam, that's where Nicola Willis is getting it from both sides. She's got former finance ministers of a certain era calling for her to resign. She's got the critics on her own side. Yep. But the point that Dale made, I was reading the CTU saying they used to have regular conversations with John Key and they can't get a meeting with Prime Minister Luxon. And you're left again. Are you better being honest about the situation and the fact that you're going to look to all quarters of society to try and resolve it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what's poisonous. What's absolutely poisonous is telling people to ignore the evidence of their eyes and ears. All right. So if you being optimistic, being positive at a time when that isn't actually being felt is a fast ticket to losing an election, because you are signaling people that you're completely out of touch. Honesty is the best policy. I mean, it always is, but particularly as when you talk about the economy, you can't talk it up into success.
Okay.
Yeah, workers aren't the enemy either. The fact that the hierarchy of government aren't talking regularly with those who represent working class people, surely there's a misstep there. So something needs to be done to mend the relationship.
Of working class people.
Yeah,
Not the 9% of working class people in the union.
All right.
Yeah, well, that's in the union, but it's a general term for people who are banging away, Liam. It's maybe we should start addressing how many houses people have, and one should surely be enough.
Okay, let's talk about the polls, because the basic results keep coming out the same. It's tied up between the left and right blocks. The standout, as we've discussed many times, is the strength of the smaller parties, plural, all of them, at this stage of the economic cycle. The second standout coming out of the RNZ poll on the Talbot Mills is that this government is copping the blame for the way things are, Liam, and that will be worrying them particularly. In the RNZ poll, more voters blame the struggling economy on the coalition than the previous Labour government. In the Talbot Mills, I think 45% rated this government as worse than its predecessor. That's a worrying underlying message for this government.
Yeah, like we're in a war of attrition now in the polls, right? Like it's very static, and you've got between two really ideologically defined camps with no one in the middle. It's a real no man's land in the middle, which is unusual for New Zealand politics. But that can only work against the government, right? Because the government is the incumbent, so the attrition is mostly going to come against the government side of things. What's really going to be fascinating about it is that there isn't a united future. There isn't a previous version of New Zealand First that was kind of, quite centrist and in the middle. The small parties have worked out that the trick to survival is sort of behaving as badly as possible, knowing that their voters won't punish them for it, leaving National and Labour to fight out the middle. But that's a bad dynamic for National because it's the main incumbent party. So, I just can't be optimistic about next year. I mean, having said that, we've seen things turn around within a year in the past. The week is a long time in politics, and a year is even longer. But the status quo can only work to National's disadvantage over time.
Dale,
yeah, they're gone skis. No, honestly, it's going to be an interesting race for the reins of power next year, without doubt, Catherine, Liam. But it just feels like that the left bloc is starting to gain ground and starting to overtake, Labour, the Greens, the Party Māori, all of those parties. 70% of their supporters, as we know, the high 70s, believe that this mob are doing a rank job.
Yeah, but is that on the basis of opposition and people just being completely peed off, to be frank? Because Labour's sitting at 35% of the Talbot Mills without having announced a single policy and having been turfed out of office as it was less than 2 years ago. And at the point they have to start articulating policy, will it start to get interesting?
Yeah,
no,
well, it's an
don't.
interesting tactic that they're employing.
Well, sometime you have to, don't you? At some point,
they don't. Of course, they don't. No, that's governments lose. It's the basic basis of our system is it's adversarial, right? If you're the incumbent, it's up to you to defend. It's not on the opposition to do anything but oppose. All right.
Yeah, but come on. So, when we get to the gnarly end, I can still remember John Key, show me the money against Phil Goff. You at some point you are tested. They've got to put their tax policy out before the end of the year.
But did that change the election? I don't think it did. And we had the same criticism of National in 2023 when it won. It's always the case that the defenders of the government will accuse the opposition of keeping their powder dry for as long as possible and for ducking hard questions. That's the case all elections all around the world, and it won't be any different here. And fair enough.
All right, can we talk about what one of the issues may be and what will, I'm sure, be a subject of discussion during election year, which is where Labour is vis-a-vis Te Pāti Māori and potential policies. Chris Hipkins has been very careful in the way he's talked about some of the questions that have been put to him. I think the latest one was that he's not interested in this automatic citizens proposal for Māori who are born overseas. But are we going to see Labour at some point having to go head-to-head with Te Pāti Māori, Dale, or are they going to have to walk this difficult line of looking like a cohesive either coalition option or Labour Green with Te Pāti Māori support? How significant is this going to be?
Yeah, well, I think the three left bloc parties have a synergy there that they will be able to manipulate a little better. They need to get around a table, and I think they will. Quite obviously, Labor are keeping their gunpowder dry, as Liam suggested, and that's appropriate. But there's a lot of areas I think that they can collaborate on. The tax issue is going to be important. I mean, we've got this Palestinian thing that's hanging in the background. The citizenship issue is certainly worthy of discussion, but I don't think it's going to be a priority when it comes to voting tendencies. The Greens, obviously, have already teamed up with Labor before. It's whether or not a decent relationship can be cultivated with Te Pāti Māori that'll marry into what they're trying to achieve. They won't want to forego their autonomy or mana motuhake, and that's their right. But I think that collectively that they will when they're brought together, and they've got personalities that can assist with that. That they'll be a force to be reckoned with come election time next year.
What's happening within Te Pāti Māori, though? Because we saw the whip changing, we saw the leaders apologising on behalf of Taku Te Wheres for what he said last week, and then he came out and said it again. Is this just situation normal for political parties, or is there a deeper issue in there at the moment, Dale?
I think it's the Māori way, isn't it? You give people the right to express themselves, to invoke their own personal rangatiratanga, and Takuta came out with a statement that some found to be offensive. Others say, oh, well, actually, there's a little bit in what he's saying, probably warrants a hui and more discussion. But we're not going to be berating each other publicly. I think they were quite delicate in their criticism, saying that he could have chosen his words a bit more carefully. But the gist of it all is that they're fighting for a position in our parliamentary system not chosen by them, and so it's a matter of working together. I mean, even today there was, when I spoke with Hehir, the president of the party, he says, surely it's a time now for us to talk about neutrality, right in the midst of Winston's trip to the UN, right in the midst of Trump's overbearing attitude on the geopolitical environment. And I'm not hearing that from other parties. Yeah. That'll appeal to Māori voters. Trying to talk about some sort of neutrality and issues of that nature. So the Left Bloc, I think, have great potential for next year.
Liam, how do you see it and Te Pāti Māori's role? Because the numbers suggest they'll absolutely be needed at least in some sort of support arrangement in order to get confidence and supply. At least that. How do you see this as unfolding in the heat of an election year?
Depending on how the government campaigns on it, it could be the wedge that sinks Labour. I mean, Te Pāti Māori twice accused the last Labour government of committing genocide, of being a genocidal government. Both of those comments aimed at its COVID policies. That was Debbie Nalia Packer who made that accusation. Chris Hipkins was a member of that government. How can you be good friends with someone who you have accused of genocide against your people twice? There's a long record of Te Pāti Māori saying quite outrageous things, and that has been a pattern for all small parties in New Zealand more recently. But the difference is, and I know that people will push back on this, but the difference is that for whatever reason, it's a bit more of pushing off an open door when it comes to Te Pāti Māori.
I don't think it was an inappropriate term, Liam. It wasn't that genocide. Inappropriate. Mate, when you look at the disparity and the inequity in our health system and the way it hasn't been addressed by successive governments, then it could be an appropriate term. I guess the point really, who's most outrageous, New Zealand First or them?
So Chris Hipkins committed genocide.
Part of governmental approaches over historic governmental approaches that have caused the unnecessary deaths of Māori people, I don't think can be challenged.
You see, this is the point, Liam. Like, you're outraged. Many people will be outraged, but parties talking to their own people have their own interpretations and their own perspectives and their own reactions to these things. My question is, in an election year, whether the leader of Labour in particular can manage those differences and the way same in the coalition government. When New Zealand First and ACT start speaking to their own core support bases, whether Chris Hipkins has the ability to make it look like a cohesive governing option.
It's different. Because New Zealand First and ACT never accused National Party of genocide. If they did, then it would be very easy. The media would hold them to account. they would ask Chris Luxon what he thought about being accused of being a genocide or complicit in genocide or overseeing a genocide, and that would cause an irrevocable rift between those two parties. Because the Hipkins playbook on Te Pāti Māori is to be as passive as possible, not to stir up the differences, to sort of distance himself from policies, but not to really criticise them. And that makes sense because Te Pāti Māori has all the energy, has a lot of energy on the left. Nothing good can come from them being in tension or fighting. But if the opposition is smart and can force that wedge between them, can force responses from both sides, that is a genuine wedge, because it's quite amazing. If you think that a government committed genocide against you, and then 3 years later you want to go into coalition with it, that's something that you can put the government on the back foot about.
Yeah, Dale, is he right, or is the outrage going to be amongst people who aren't going to vote for Te Pāti Māori and possibly aren't going to vote for Labour in some instances? Or is he right? Is this going to be a vulnerability for the left?
The imposed and arrogant political system that our people have had to operate under has committed genocide. It's not a particular government, and so the word, whilst it's used, doesn't cause such offence in Tau Māori as it might to Liam and others.
Okay.
They accuse Labour, this last Labour government, of it twice.
Okay. Let's talk about the decision around the state of Palestine. The Foreign Minister is on his way and is going to reveal whether or not New Zealand will join the other nations who have recognised the state of Palestine. Liam, he was obviously frustrated at some of the comments that were made by the ACT leader last week when asked about his personal position, a cabinet decision having been made. But again, how significant is this announcement going to be at the end of the week? What's your focus on it and what the reaction might be?
Yeah, look, Winston Peters is a populist through and through when it comes to domestic issues. When it comes to foreign affairs, he's extremely mainstream and follows the lead of the international community. It's such a marked difference from him and David Seymour, who has much more of an American-style populism about him in government as well as in opposition. So, look, my expectation is that there is an internal coalition dynamic where ACT is much more American in their sort of outlook, and that's always going to be a handbrake on New Zealand recognising Palestine, which I think is the right thing to do. But on the whole, over time, the mainstream international consensus will prevail in New Zealand, and I think that we will end up recognising Palestine. We won't be at the forefront of it, but we will be a fast follower of other nations, and that's simply because there will be too much for ACT to hold out on. If it was a New Zealand first national coalition, we would be moving much faster on this. And I think Winston Peters is quite right to be frustrated at David Seymour for offering his personal view after a cabinet decision had been made. That's quite. I think it's not very constitutionally proper. But it goes to show this coalition has the least amount of internal cohesion of any that we've seen.
And Dale, do you see that as a possibility again, that maybe a position one of the parties holds will see such a decision by the New Zealand government happening later rather than sooner?
Yeah, and I think it's an indictment on our nation that forged a reputation of being free-thinking, free-spirited people, and our record speaks for itself in that regard. I'd say it's been very poorly handled. I can't understand the secret squirrel stuff and why we have to wait until later this week to find out our own country's position on an issue that's been tabled right across the world, and that we're coming in, later in the piece again doesn't reflect well on us, and it does have a negative impact on the perception of the coalition government as to their reasons why so many sound-thinking New Zealanders have been kept in the dark about this.
I thank both of you very much for your time, as always. That is Dale Husband. Thanks also to Liam Hehir.